excuse my voice. Our last presenter for today is Victoria Moten. Victoria is a doctoral student in the English department at Howard University, and she's a lecturer at the University of Maryland, College Park. She earned her MA and her BA in English from Clark Atlanta University, and her major field of study is African American literature. She is interested in what the speculative fiction texts Black women writers from Zora Neale Hurston to Octavia Butler teach us about our connection to the cosmos. Victoria is a Hurston Wright Fellow, and James Patterson is a Hurston Wright Fellow, and her creative writing ranges from poetry, short fiction, from biographical to speculative, and she can be found in Black Friday Press and The Obsidian. Welcome, Victoria.
Good morning. This is actually a part of a series that I am doing called Reverberations. It's interdisciplinary. I'm taking natural sciences and merging them with where do I see natural science emerge in specifically Black speculative fiction. So I'll be looking at two neo-slave narratives. So I'm actually using Butler's least scientific text in order to talk about this idea. So dialogue between ancestors and descendants subverts the idea of linear time. One cannot travel backward in time. If one cannot travel backward in time, then how can the descendants in both Butler's Kindred and Ward's let us descend engage with the past? With this liminal space, both women embody what theorist Michelle M. Wright calls epiphenomenal time. Wright rejects this idea of linear time and instead postulates in her text, The Physics of Blackness, that ancestral trauma and resistance are not confined to the past, but resonate across generations. I will place her theory in conversation with both texts to reveal the ways that Butler and Ward challenge the spatial and temporal boundaries of linear time, presenting an interdimensional space where ancestors and descendants can engage with each other with offerings of possibility and wisdom. So what is epiphenomenal time? Michelle Wright defines epiphenomenal time as correlating with the definition of entropy, or the movement of molecules from low entropy order to high entropy disorder. Think of the graphic from just the previous one. That's what I was thinking, is it gonna play? As a visual, to give you a visual. That means that the now is always in process. That is, the present and the future are not discrete moments, but rather are conflated into one moment, that is the now. Wright challenges the idea that Black diasporic narratives are fixed on a timeline that begins with the Middle Passage by asserting that not only is everything that can be experienced already in existence, but that we are able to what we're able to perceive is based on our spatial vantage point. Another way to think of this, when we look at the stars, we're looking light years into the past in the present moment. So our spatial vantage point allows us that simultaneous experience. I will put this theory of temporal interconnectedness in conversation with both texts. First, I'd like to engage with water's role in both texts as a symbol of epiphenomenal time. Water is viewed as the primordial spring from which all life evolved. In Anisi Wardy's Water in the African American Memory, an eco-critical perspective, she foregrounds her argument with ancestral African cosmology that features water as a space of restoration, memory, and rebirth. Wright, however, argues in her chapter, The Problem of Return in the Physics of Blackness, that to seek a point of origin is fruitless. However, water is and has always been transferred from one celestial body to Earth, the moon. Through collision, water here operates as more cyclic temporal phases like the concept of Sankofa. And both texts, ancestors, and descendants are summoned by their kin when they enter a body of water. So you can read this quote. Just as each wave holds millions of droplets of water, interconnected, each wave also holds all the water that has ever been in its current, directing the patterns of the sea. And both authors include this interconnectedness in both texts. Water here acting as not just the now, but the liminal space. It is between earth and sky. So in Octavia Butler's Kindred, Dana is summoned to rescue her slave-owning great-great-great-grandfather Rufus when he is nearly drowned. Leaving the spatial and temporal reality of the 1970s, Butler delivers Dana in a space that gives her little time to think. She must act instinctually. This is from the text. I reacted to the child in trouble. Didn't think about what was happening. She just acted. Placed in a moment of chaos, Dana's movement resists linear narratives of intentional direction forward, but it moves into that space of epiphenomenal time where she is just moving from a place of order into chaos. Wright explains particles can somehow anticipate the changes and adapt to them before having encountered them. However, rather than interpret this as the ability to change the past by seeing into the future, physicists theorize that it indicates the primacy of the present moment, which is neither an effect of the past nor a cause of the future. Similarly, in Let Us Descend by Jesmyn Ward, Aziza, the spirit guide in this text, is summoned by Anise, who is a part of a chain gang being sold downriver when she nearly drowns. She literally blinks into being when she enters the water. Anise wonders why her mother never told her. She told her that the world was wet with spirit, but she never told her about this particular watery spirit. This watery spirit had actually been summoned by her grandmother on a slave ship on the Atlantic Ocean, so another body of water, and then again by her mother, and then by Anise. Here in Pazzo's Ghost of Memory, we have Aziza functions as a link between Anise's forebears, experience reality, and in an alternative reality that exists simultaneously, Ward crafts a parallel universe of liquid interconnectedness. So there's a lot of interdimensional work happening here. So there are other interdimensional spaces throughout the text. Here we have, if we think of Kindred, we have Alice's house in the woods, right? When Dana returns into her own home, she returns wet with the river water. So she is bringing things from the material world, from Rufus's material world into her material world. Butler remarked in an interview about Kindred why she had Dana, so Dana returns with most of her arm missing. So part of her arm is in this interdimensional space. She mentions here, I think it really symbolizes her not coming back whole. Antebellum slavery didn't leave people quite whole, that a piece of themselves, a piece of their descendants really, are still caught in that particular spatial existence. Similarly, in Let Us Descend, we have Anise actually engages in marionage. I love this quote from the text. I turn back to my hidden green wall room. These interdimensional spaces actually act as spaces of fugitivity, where even if briefly, they're not bound to the spatial laws of their present realities. Ward acknowledges this otherworldly space in an interview that she delivered about why she included this speculative feature in Let Us Descend, looking at the space just beyond the surface of our material reality. I don't have time to read all these long quotes that I added. So in Wright's exploration of epiphenomenal time, she critiques this mistranslation of Newton's laws of motion and gravity into linear progress narratives that place Western civilization in a continuously moving forward fashion that places other communities behind or static. She argues that individuals belong to many distinguishable collectives, not just one, and that the attempt to interpolate them into a grand narrative sort of flattens the array of possibilities. She includes in this critique Annette Henry's idea of middle passage epistemology to explore the failings of linear progress narratives. So she says here the first limit of linear progress narrative is that of origins. She doesn't believe in looking for an original starting point because that would require a static past in order for there to be a return. But as my fellow panelists have pointed out, Octavia Butler is all about dynamics, right? It's all about change. In Parable of the Sower, she even remarks, the only lasting truth is change, right? So in Kindred, while it may appear, as Wright argues in The Problem of Return, that the past is static, I argue that Butler is revealing the now of epiphenomenal time, that these things are happening simultaneously, that it's all interconnected. This is most evident in the idea of free will or agency displayed in both texts. While Wright argues that Dana's agency is complicated by the limitations of middle passage epistemology, explaining that the moment of return must require a fixed past, Dana's reactions, and she says that Dana's reactions are predicated on Rufus's agency. Dana, as a descendant, actually, she doesn't address the fact that Dana returning as a descendant has a paradoxical presence. Physicists would call this the grandfather paradox, where a descendant cannot change or fix the past as it determines their existence. No matter what Dana does, nothing can change, but she is still in active motion. How can she be in existence in the future if what she does now changes that particular future? Both ancestors and descendants in each text reveal their humility or humanity. The ideas, the decisions that Dana makes are not calculated, they are instinctual. So hearkening back to that idea of epiphenomenal time just doing what it does, right? So we also have in Let Us Descend these acts of agency. So Anise, when she becomes pregnant, she uncleaves herself from the spirit Aziza. But Aziza is also, she is not a benevolent spirit. She's not malevolent either, but she has her own wants, needs, desires, and she does what she wants to do. And so in looking at agency in that manner, but also when Anise emancipates herself by choosing marriage, she nurtures the life growing inside of her by untethering herself from this idea of linear time through Aziza, the spirit. So we also have this idea of intergenerational knowledge. Collective memory has been a part of African cosmology for some time. Fred Moten would describe this as radical indistinctness, while Amiri Baraka would call this unself-consciousness. Toni Morrison acknowledges this as rememory. Christina Sharp describes it as being in the wake. While Michelle Wright's exploration of epiphenomenal time speaks to the evanescence of time, no past to return to, no future to hope for, but a continuous thread where we live in a constant now. So a web, if you will. In Let Us Descend, there is a scene where the women are chained together in a slave coffle and they have to cross a river and they must help each other in order to save themselves, symbolizing this intergenerational knowledge. But in addition, Anise is bringing her knowledge from her mother's knowledge of herbs. She is bringing the fierceness of her grandmother's warrior status in order to survive her present moment. Most of what saves her is actually not the spirit. It is the knowledge from her predecessors that she carries along with her. Author Christine Platt would actually call this a blood memory. So it's always a part of the chain of kinship here. This intergenerational dialogue occurs frequently throughout the text, and they are a part of her material world. So there are moments when it appears that her mother is right there. In Kindred, one gap, well, I already talked about the gap in Wright's idea here, this failure to engage with other non-linear temporal concepts, such as the concept of Sankofa, but also the Igbo concept of Ibanji, or a spirit child who repeatedly dies and is reborn. In this way, Stella Steka posits that Dana's time travel is actually an intrusion of the traumatic past into the present, allowing her to viscerally engage. So this idea that the descendants of slaves still carry their reality, their spatial reality, their embodied reality. When she returns home, Dana has to revisit this site of memory, as Toni Morrison would call it, because she needs solid evidence that this actually happened. Like, was it a dream, right? And the fact that she finds little further establishes this kind of liminal borderland that she resided in that moment. History memory is complicated. A great many violent things occurred, occurring, will occur in order for this particular present moment to happen. From the collision of heavenly bodies to wars to more personal acts of violence. What both of these texts illustrate are those complications. Wright argues that this is a move from order to chaos, while other scholars who engage with African cosmological lenses would say that this is a cycle. I argue that both are at work, but what is particularly arresting about epiphenomenal time is this idea that everything that ever was, is, and will ever have been. Yes, that doesn't make sense. It's not supposed to. It's interdimensional. So come along with me in the interdimension. It's not that you cannot change or amend history. It is that you've already made the decision. If the forces of time were to intervene, it would complicate the idea of free will or agency. And so I'm looking at both of these texts and the full multiplicity of dimensionalities, as Fred Moten might call it, no relation, by the way. The intelligibility of Blackness, right? That it's not just one straight line that we can follow, it is very interconnected, which panelists have also said.